He sat alone on a bench near the flagpole, grey hair, a faded jacket, and eyes that had witnessed wars no medal could ever explain. The recruits walked past him, some snickering under their breath. One even said, "Lost your nursing home, Grandpa?" The others laughed. He didn't respond. Hours later, those same young men stood in formation, sweat drying on their brows, still unaware of what was coming. Then the officer's voice rang out. "Gentlemen, the man approaching is a living legend," and the laughter vanished into silence. Fort Dalton woke up before the sun did. The early wind rustled through the flagpoles, making the ropes clink against the metal like faint bells. Steam rose from the kitchen vents of the mess hall, and the training field was already marked with fresh footprints, stretching in neat lines like scars on the earth. It was the first day of a new training cycle, and the base was alive with energy. Recruits filing in, drill sergeants barking orders, clipboards snapping shut. Everything ran like a machine, tight and relentless. But at the far edge of the base, beyond the gravel road that curved past the parade field, a man was walking alone. He wore a simple olive jacket, too thin for the morning cold, and a pair of worn tan trousers. His shoulders sloped gently from age, but his spine remained straight, held by habit. His boots were clean but cracked, the leather softened by time. And though his hands trembled slightly as they rested atop a wooden cane, his steps were deliberate, measured. His name was Jack Monroe, and 56 years ago he had marched across this very same courtyard. Under the same flag, Jack paused near the rusted water fountain beside Barracks 3. It looked almost identical, same chipped paint, same patch of gravel beside the drain. He touched the edge with his fingertips, and for a second, the base around him faded. He could hear the distant chants of cadences, taste the sweat from endless drills beneath a July sun. He walked further. The mess hall had been renovated, but its bones were the same. He stepped inside quietly, nodding to the staff prepping trays for the incoming recruits. No one stopped him. No one questioned the old man with the soft eyes and slow steps. Jack walked down the corridor that led toward the main drill yard, his palm brushing the cinder block walls as if reading the memories buried in them. He stopped in front of a framed photograph near the east stairwell, a class graduation portrait from 1968. In the bottom row, third from the left, was a younger version of himself. Chin high, uniform crisp, a future still unwritten behind. His eyes. He stared at it for a while, then he smiled. Not with joy, but with weight. That kind of smile people give cemeteries. Outdoors, a sudden gust of wind tugged at his jacket. Jack stepped into the open, looking across the yard where rows of recruits were now forming, lining up in pairs. Their voices were sharp, their backs straight, but their eyes were still young, too young to know what this place would take from them, and too young to understand what it had already given to men like him. Jack found a bench near the main flagpole and sat down slowly, wincing as his knees bent. He set the cane against the side and folded his hands over his lap. The breeze carried, the scent of damp earth and steel. The flag above him fluttered, catching the first golden threads of sunlight. For a moment, everything was still. He closed his eyes, and the past returned in fragments. A scream on the radio, the rattle of gunfire in the jungle, the way Corporal Mendez bled through his uniform, whispering his daughter's name, the roar of the helicopter blades as they lifted away from fire, and the silence afterward. Jack opened his eyes. The recruits were moving now, running drills along the perimeter wall, their voices bouncing off the concrete. Somewhere nearby, a whistle blew, sharp, authoritative. But no one noticed the old man on the bench, and that was fine with him. He hadn't come to be seen. He'd come to remember. The recruits jogged around the courtyard with the clumsy urgency of those still trying to impress. Their boots slapped against the pavement in uneven rhythms, their uniforms stiff and unforgiving, still smelling of starch and nerves. From his bench, Jack Monroe watched them in silence. He wasn't judging. In truth, he didn't think much at all. He simply observed, the way a seasoned farmer might watch a young field grow, patiently, quietly. That's when they noticed him. 3 recruits, fresh cuts on their faces from razor burns, dog tags, swinging with every step, slowed as they jogged past. The youngest one, tall and wiry, glanced at Jack and gave a crooked grin. "Look at this guy," he muttered, just loud enough for the others to hear. "Lost your nursing home, Grandpa." The others chuckled. Jack didn't react. His hands remained folded. His eyes stayed on the flagpole. But the recruit wasn't finished. He slowed to a walk, breaking formation, peeling off from the group with a swagger he hadn't earned. "Hey, you know this is a restricted area, right?" he said, standing in front of Jack now. "You need to check in with base security. You can't just wander around like some—" Jack looked up at him calmly. His expression held no anger, no judgment, just weariness. The kind that comes from knowing this scene all too well. "I'm just visiting," Jack said, voice gravelly but composed. "Didn't mean to cause any trouble." The recruit scoffed and turned to his buddies who had stopped a few paces behind. "You believe this guy?" he laughed. "Probably thinks he's still in the army. Hell, maybe he was never in it." From a nearby office window, a man in uniform closed the blinds quietly. Captain Reeves, officer of the day, had seen everything and heard more than the recruit realized. Jack rose slowly from the bench, using his cane for balance. His knees protested, but he didn't show it. He gave the young man a soft nod. "You boys take care," he said gently. Then he walked away, not hurried, not shaken, just as he'd arrived. As he passed the edge of the yard, he paused briefly, turning his eyes to the training field one last time before disappearing behind the corner of the mess hall. The young recruit rolled his eyes. "Man, these old guys really think the world still revolves around them," he muttered, shaking his head. One of the friends nodded in agreement. "We're out here sweating, and he's just sitting there in the shade watching us." The whistle blew again. "Move it!" barked a drill sergeant from across the yard. The boys snapped back into formation and jogged off. Up in the admin building, Captain Reeves picked up the phone and dialed an internal extension. "Lieutenant Grant," he said, "I need you to prep the company for an address at 1800 and get a clean podium in the main hall. We're hosting a visitor." That evening, the sky over Fort Dalton turned the color of old brass. Heavy clouds moving in slow from the west, dragging the wind behind them like a curtain. The recruits finished chow in silence, their bodies sore, minds still racing from the intensity of the day. Jack Monroe, meanwhile, sat alone at the edge of the base chapel, his silhouette framed by the low light spilling from the arched windows. He hadn't returned to his car. He hadn't left the base. He was just still. He looked down at his hands, calloused, scarred, spotted with age. His fingers traced the outline of an old ring he no longer wore. Then he reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a folded slip of laminated paper. It was brittle, the corners frayed. A single photograph creased through the center. A man in a stretcher, half conscious, his face bloodied, one leg missing below the knee. And standing behind him, uniform torn, rifle slung low, mouth clenched in determination, was Jack. Younger, stronger, but with the same steel in his eyes. That day, years ago, had started with static on the comms. Ambush in the valley. They weren't supposed to be there, not with enemy patrols that close, but orders were orders. Jack was leading a recon unit through the tree line when the explosion hit. One of his men, Private First Class Daniel Whitaker, went down hard, a landmine ripping through the soil and shredding his right leg. The firefight that followed was brutal, but Jack didn't fall back. He moved toward the blast, covering fire in all directions, grabbing Whitaker's vest and dragging him to the tree line under relentless fire. 2 bullets grazed Jack's shoulder. One ripped through his thigh, but he didn't stop. It wasn't in his nature. By the time the chopper arrived, Jack had already tied off the tourniquet, applied pressure, and held Whitaker's pulse steady with his bare hands. He refused evac until every other soldier was lifted. When the flight crew finally hauled Jack aboard, he passed out cold, still holding the bloodied helmet of the man he saved. That man would spend 6 months recovering. And after his discharge, he'd become a civilian contractor and a father. His son's name? Ethan Whitaker. Now 19 years old. Now at Fort Dalton. Now laughing at the man who once carried his father from death. Jack stared at the photograph for a long time, his thumb brushing over Daniel's face. He wasn't angry about the boy's words. Disrespect was cheap, and youth, careless. But what he remembered most from that day wasn't the gunfire or the blood. It was what Daniel said through cracked lips just before losing consciousness. "You shouldn't have come back for me." And Jack had answered, simply, "We don't leave our own behind." The chapel bell rang once, a soft, ceremonial chime. Jack folded the photograph gently and placed it back in his jacket. From a distance, Captain Reeves stood near the admin building, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the old man beneath the chapel's light. He didn't approach. Not yet. There was something sacred about that silence. And men like Jack, they spoke loudest when they said nothing at all. The main hall of Fort Dalton had been cleared out by 1745. Rows of folding chairs lined the polished concrete floor, each one filled with a tired recruit, uniforms damp with sweat, boots dusty from the field. Captain Reeves stood at the podium, his presence heavier than usual. A silence settled over the room, not the silence of boredom or exhaustion, but something denser, anticipatory. Captain Reeves adjusted the mic and cleared his throat. "Recruits," he began, "today you woke up civilians and will go to sleep soldiers in training. But some men, some never stop carrying the uniform, even when it's no longer on their chest." A pause. "Tonight, you'll meet one of those men." The door at the rear of the hall opened. Slow footsteps, steady, familiar. Jack Monroe entered, wearing the same olive jacket. Only now, his bronze star and silver stars were pinned proudly on his chest, polished until they caught the light. Behind him walked 2 high-ranking officers, a colonel and a general, hands clasped behind their backs in quiet reverence. The room stood still. As Jack approached the front, Captain Reeves stepped aside. Then, for the first time that day, the room moved in unison. Dozens of recruits stood and raised their right hands to their brows, a flawless salute, sharp as a blade drawn from its sheath. Captain Reeves took the mic again. Jack Monroe served 3 tours. He was wounded twice, declined discharge, rescued over a dozen soldiers in active fire zones. But there's one story, one I think you all should hear. He turned toward the projector and clicked a remote. A faded photo appeared on the screen. A jungle clearing, a mangled body on a stretcher, and a soldier crouched beside him, eyes forward, rifle slung across his back. Private First Class Daniel Whitaker. Critically wounded during Operation Hellbound in '73, left leg gone, bleeding out in the kill zone. Ethan blinked. Whitaker, Captain Reeves continued. Jack Monroe, already shot twice, crawled 80 yards under fire, pulled Whitaker to cover, stabilized him, and refused evac until every other man was airborne. Ethan's throat dried. Whitaker survived, lost the leg, went home, built a family, raised a son. The sentence hung in the air like thunder without lightning. Ethan didn't need it to be finished. He knew. He looked up at the screen, at the stretcher, at the man behind it, and suddenly the old face he mocked that morning became something else entirely. The shame came fast, burning down his neck, across his ears. His pulse thudded against his collar. He couldn't breathe. Jack stood at the podium now, his cane beside him. Then calmly, he addressed the room. Fort Dalton taught me how to march, how to shoot, how to lead." He looked around. "This place made me a soldier, but it was the pain and the suffering etched on the faces of my brothers in arms that taught me what it truly means to be a man, and to understand the value of life." He paused. No reprimand, no mention of earlier, not a word about disrespect. Jack didn't need to say it. His presence was the lesson. He stepped back from the podium, giving a small nod to the commanding officers. Then, without another word, he began his slow walk back down the aisle, the cane tapping like a soft drum beat. As he passed Ethan's row, the young man didn't move. Not until Jack was several steps beyond. Then, without thinking, Ethan stood. "Sir." The word cracked. Everyone turned. Jack paused halfway to the door, but he didn't look back. Ethan's eyes welled. He swallowed hard and saluted, alone. Jack gave only the slightest glance over his shoulder, not of approval, but acknowledgement. That was all. And for Ethan Whitaker, it was enough to carry for a lifetime. The hall emptied slowly. The recruits filed out in silence. Not the dazed silence of exhaustion, but the kind that sits heavy in the chest, makes the heart beat slower. They moved like men who had seen something holy. Ethan Whitaker stayed, behind, staring at the projector screen long after it had gone dark. His hands trembled as he removed his cap, fingers tightening over the brim. The weight of shame didn't crush him. It reformed him. Captain Reeves walked up beside him, arms folded. "You know," he said quietly, "he didn't want to speak tonight." Ethan looked over, eyes red. "Why did he?" Reeves shrugged. "Maybe he saw something in all of you worth waking up again." Ethan lowered his eyes. "He should have said something earlier. When I—" Reeves interrupted gently. "Men like Jack Monroe don't speak for their dignity. They just carry it." Outside, the air had cooled. The yard lights glowed amber, casting long shadows over the gravel paths. Jack stood by the flagpole again, hands behind his back. Behind him, a voice called out from the main building. "Monroe." He turned slowly. A man with a steel gray prosthetic and a cane of his own walked toward him. Daniel Whitaker. The lines on his face mirrored Jack's, though carved from a different kind of pain. The pain of being saved, of surviving, because someone else chose to bleed. They met halfway. Daniel stopped, eyes glossy. 52 years, he said. "And I never got to shake your hand properly." Jack extended his hand. No words. Their grip was firm, quiet, decades overdue. Daniel smiled faintly. "That's my boy you saw today." Jack's face didn't change, but his eyes softened. "Figured." Daniel looked back toward the drill field, where Ethan and the other two recruits now stood at attention, facing the empty yard. Captain Reeves approached behind them, voice firm. Recruits Whitaker, Jones, and Lee, front and center. The three young men moved quickly, boots thudding into place. "You will complete 5 miles around the perimeter," Reeves said. "Full gear, no breaks. You'll repeat this every morning for a week." Ethan nodded, jaw clenched. Reeves turned to Jack. "Permission to proceed, sir?" Jack blinked. "Not necessary." Reeves looked him in the eye. "No, it is." The recruits didn't protest. They didn't groan. They saluted and began jogging, packs loaded, heads down. Daniel watched them go. Jack began to walk. Daniel followed. They moved slowly, side by side, through the base they had both known in different eras, past the mess hall, past Barracks 3, past the water fountain near the old flagpole where time seemed to bend. As they walked, Daniel spoke again. "He's a good kid. Just needed to truly learn what respect is." Jack gave a slow nod. Behind them, Ethan and the others circled the perimeter, the rhythmic sound of boots echoing softly. If you believe people like Jack deserve to be remembered and respected, type respect in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story, especially for you.